Hi students, I wanted to show you the next step of the splatter project. Um, Once this has dried overnight, which was the two opposite colors that you threw onto the paper outside, and now it's created some really interesting edges and wet blending and different saturations. And what we're going to do with this, as I showed you in the module, is to draw one large object, or one large object with a couple smaller ones with it. It's going to take up the entire page, so it should be approximately this size for that space. You don't want to have some tiny thing in the middle surrounded by a bunch of negative space. Another thing I've noticed is that people don't make things that are man-made correct in terms of verticality and ellipses. I chose this object that I'm going to draw on here. It's a man-made object, and it has a lot of verticals as well as ellipses. And I'm going to throw in a couple smaller things just for fun that I'm going to put on here so that I can show you some different techniques. I'm actually going to put one up here and one down here and another one over here so that I can show you a technique that people forget to do as well with the really good brushes. So I can't really pop this right here in the middle, but I'm going to set it over here and I'm going to draw it. I prefer that you don't use carbon paper, but you can. You can also use that method where you rub it on the back so that the lines aren't so hard and hard to erase. That way it gets very cartoony. So I always prefer just drawing it directly after some practice. And I want to show you a method to prevent those lines from going like this by using a hard edge or a T-square. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw this by putting this on here because I want to do a technique involving either flare out or even wash in the back that takes advantage of really getting up close instead of too far away from the object. People create a halo or they don't get in enough to get rid of the line, because ultimately we want to get rid of the line. If you have something like flowers or brushes in a jar, it's going to be more complex, so it's important that you know about this technique. So I would start to draw for practice, but during the practice I can show you what's going on in terms of the verticality of things. We have the paper here. It's a little bit bent in the video, but we're going to use that edge to create a right angle. So if you don't have a T-square, that's an option. If you do, it really helps to have this option to slide through to check your verticals. That way you can check them later by sliding your T-square along the edge like we do and making sure that your objects are correct. Since I'm doing a man-made object, and I'm going to draw it on here, and then I put a couple little tomatoes on there just for a little organic reference. So I always want to do very large, because we're doing this very large. Better that it even goes off the edge than be too small. And I want it to be big, and I want to use loose gestural marks, remembering that the ellipses further down below my eye are going to be taller than the ones that go up. The more you practice and the more you draw, you can end up getting everything accurate without tools. But in the interim, it's always helpful to go ahead and render them as is. So I'm looking for the proportions between the top and the bottom. I'm going to lower this a little so that I can show you the technique. So I'm going to try to get this right in this area. And the more you can practice this at home before you start actually rendering it and painting it, the better. So I'm really studying it, getting a sense of where this is going to end in terms of where that tomato is going to be. And once I feel pretty comfortable with this, then you want to start drawing on there or transferring it. But remember, you have to use a T-square to get those. People always lean these in, or they flare out, or this is uneven. This has to be horizontally. If you were doing an organizational drawing like I did with the olives, you would have to use verticals. I always say just draw a rectangle first when you're rendering something man-made, and from there figure out your ellipses. That way this is guaranteed to be accurate. So I'm going to start pretty low on here. And now that I've gotten somewhat familiar, lightly with pencil draw it there, because you can erase the parts that you don't want. And I'm going to go up. It's a pretty tall object, and I want to fit it in only because I want you to see that technique I want to do with the tomato. And then I have one here, and then I have my other tomato here. It's okay if it goes off the edge. Mine kind of fit a little bit here. Looking at the negative space here, up here, and I'm getting a sense of the steepness. We're not going to paint the inside at all. We're letting this beautiful splatter be the actual main event, such as here and here. But if you need to add some interior contours, that helps. And you can erase those later or just lightly leave them there. Because we're going to do some things to get rid of those. We don't want lines to show dramatically, and I don't want all this detail on here. Okay, so let's say I get to here. Move this a little. And I have my tomato going off the top. I wanted to show you a technique with that. So here it goes off the top. And then this swings behind it. And I'll use the same technique over here. Now, when you go to put in your horizon line, you can do oval or flat. I'm going to do oval, and make sure if you do oval that it's very wide. If you make it too roundy, it looks weird, like a little balloon. It's got to look like something is sitting naturally on a surface. So that's it. Very simple project, but this is the technique I wanted to show you, because what we're going to do is drip down the warmer of the two colors and flare out or fill an even wash with the cooler in the background. So I'll go ahead and start with the foreground. You remember this technique, the drip down, where we use a wider brush and just put some water right to the edge, not all over, just strategically around and particularly below these objects, and a little bit on the line there, but I'm leaving some dry on purpose. Then I take a smaller brush and get it relatively saturated in the red-orange that I used to do the splatter. And lift this up. I'm going to put a little here, wherever the water is. And of course I can make it slightly more saturated since it's wet. But this is what we want here, is this drip down effect. And lift it up and drip it down. If you want a little more, or you want to add a little more, in my case a little more red. As long as there's water in it. I can get that effect where the paper is not completely covered, but I can get a beautiful little drip here. That's more than enough, but if you want a little extra in certain spots, like I'll get a little pop right here to define the bottom of my bottle. And I just put a little on the horizon line just because to shape it a little, but you don't even need that. Alright, so that's the first part. And then the top part is where I wanted to show you, because people are not getting close enough in. On the top part, you have to really, really get your cool color into the edge. You can do whatever you want with it after that in terms of flare out or even wash. Just depends on what looks best with that shape. But I'm just getting my blue-green back over here. And in this area, like for example here, I put with the tomato, you want to slow down and get right to the edge. Right to the edge. A lot of people just kind of blob it around. But here we're doing even wash, and we're really carefully going to the edge of that line. Now after that, you can kind of flare it out, or you can do even wash. You can wet the background first. You can drip it side to side. That part's up to you. But I'm trying to get it to flare out here before it dries. If it dries, you get a weird halo. So this is how you define your object. And any nuanced shape that's on there. And a lot of people are just not doing that, so you're getting this weird kind of a, I'm going to flare out. I'm going to do dry brush. But see, I'm flaring out so that I don't have that edge of a halo. And at this point, you can also make any corrections to your object. If it doesn't look symmetrical here, I'm going to try to even it out and flare it out. The other mistake people make is going past the horizon line or not utilizing it. So once this is dry, mine's not quite dry, but I just wanted to show you how I would address that. You want to go straight to the edge. In my case, I'm flaring out. You can also do even wash. But see, this is how you're defining the difference between foreground and background. Some people fill the whole background even wash. I'm just being a little more deliberate because I love what's happening here and I don't want to lose it. So I'm doing a flare out. You can use different brushes because each brush makes a different kind of a mark. And I'm not sure how this is looking because I'm flat, but if it looks asymmetrical, I can go in and repair it while I see it. So I might not be right on here, but I have enough on here to let you know what that step is about. Just beware that, like, you can even do a drip down here on this, on that cherry tomato, and just drip it down. So less is more in many ways, but you also need to get right up in there. And that's where these really good pointy little brushes get right in there, especially if you have a more elaborate shape. And make sure that you're using the same two colors that you used in the splatter. I've noticed people forget that part and then add all these other colors that are not in there. Two colors only, and that's it. And make that drip a little. So that's what I wanted to show you.